Once you've inserted a table, you can't reopen the table dialog box to make any changes to its structure. All modifications need to be made through the Property Inspector or menus. There's also a lot of keyboard shortcuts. In the exercises site, I've opened modify_.html. You can find a copy of this file in the Using Tables for Structured Data folder in the course assets. To see a table's properties in the Property Inspector, you need to select the table. You can either do that by clicking the edge of the table or clicking anywhere inside the table and then selecting Table from the tag selector at the bottom of the document window. The Table Property Inspector shows you the number of rows and columns. If you increase the number of rows, they're added at the bottom of the table. If you increase the number of columns, they're added to the right. So, as you would expect, if you decrease the number of columns, they're taken away from the right. But if you've got a column with data in it and you reduce the number of columns, both the data and the column disappear. So let's undo that. And to get rid of the 2 rows at the bottom, reduce the number of rows back to 5. In this field on the left, you can give the table an ID, and in the border field you can delete that value 1 to remove the border from the table. But all the other options are best dealt with using CSS. But you probably don't always want to add rows and columns at the bottom or on the right hand side. So that's where the menus come in. Put your insertion point inside the table, and you can either use the Modify menu and then go down to the Table submenu, and there's a whole series of options there, and you can see the keyboard shortcuts. There's quite a lot of them, quite complicated. If you're using tables a lot, they're worthwhile memorizing, but if you're not, then forget about it. The alternative is to right-click and use the context menu. So if I select Insert Row, it inserts a new row above the place where my insertion point previously was. So it's the other way round from the Property Inspector. The Property Inspector added below, using the context menu adds above. And it's similarly with columns. If you right-click, select Table and then Insert Column, it inserts it on the left of where your insertion point was. For greater control, you can right-click and then from the context menu select Insert Rows or Columns. This opens a dialog box that lets you choose whether to insert rows or columns, the number that you want to insert, and where, either before or after the current selection. So if I change this to columns and set the number of columns to 2, make it after the current column, click OK, those 2 columns have been inserted to the right of where my insertion point was. Now I don't want to keep those changes, so I'm going to go to File and select Revert. It asks me if I want to revert to the previously saved version and to lose the changes. Click Yes, and I go back to my original table. And what I want to do is I want to add a new column on the left of the table. So I'm going to right-click in the first column and then just Insert Column. It'll insert it on the left. It's very narrow space in which to begin typing because I don't want to type in that particular cell. I want to type higher up. And if you find it difficult to insert your cursor in a particular cell that's really collapsed like that, just right-click anywhere in the table. From the context menu, select Expanded Tables Mode right down at the bottom. This doesn't make any changes to the HTML. It's purely and simply a device in Design View to make it easier to put your cursor inside a cell and start typing. So I'm going to click inside there and type region. I can now exit Expanded Tables Mode by clicking the exit in the bar at the top here, and the table collapses back around the content that's in there. What I want to do is to merge these 2 cells, so I can click and drag to select those 2 cells, and in the Property Inspector it shows me here Cell, and there is this tiny little icon at the bottom left, and it says merges selected cells using spans. So I click that and those two cells are merged together. So I can now type North California, and if I want to do the same with these two cells, I could do it exactly the same way, but another way of doing it, right click in the top cell from the context menu, increase row span, and it merges the two cells. So I can now type Southern California in there. And when I click away from the table resizes to fit the content that's in there. You can also split cells into rows and columns using the various options in the context menu. But I'll leave you to experiment with all that. To make changes to a table after it's been inserted, select the table to adjust the values in the Property Inspector. Alternatively, right-click inside a table cell and select the options from the context menu. The same options are also available on the Table submenu of the Modify menu.